r/no sleep. Posted by you/02321. I work as a CSI. Part 1. The clipped body cases. I work as a crime scene investigator, and let me tell you, it's not as fun or easy as the media portray. Long hours at random locations, most of which smell horrible. You need to bag everything hoping you picked up something relevant to the case and take at least 10,000 photos at different angles. Not to mention all the sketches and diagrams you need to make with accurate notes. The DNA you send off to be tested doesn't come back for months, and most of the time doesn't even help the case you're working on. But it's a job. Most of my career has been documenting drug dens. Drug crimes in my area are way higher than any other kind. I was called to a scene of a death caused by unknown circumstances. It was a sight none of us would ever forget. A ghastly scene, and we still haven't been able to unravel the mystery of it. It was a murder. What else could it have been? It wasn't possible that death happened due to natural circumstances. I found myself standing beside my boss, burdened with all my gear but for once not feeling the weight. I stared, unable to say anything for a few minutes. Out of the hundreds of dead bodies I've seen, this one stopped me in my tracks. I was looking at a young girl stuck inside a tree. Literally stuck inside a tree. Her upper half limply hanging out with both arms and the rest of her body still inside the tree. There was no hole someone cut to shove her inside. She was too fresh to have the tree grow around her. It was like a video game glitch with an NPC being halfway inside a wall. This was reality, and things like this just didn't happen. We did the normal routine of taking photos and documenting the scene. However, everyone was silent. We only spoke when necessary. Something like this was so mind-boggling, I felt as if everyone would want to talk about it to get answers. Instead, we all averted our eyes as much as possible from the dead girl. In the end, a good chunk of the tree was cut out to retrieve the body. To our horror, there wasn't much left. Only an inch of her body was inside the tree. The rest was missing. It took days to finally painstakingly separate the two of them to find out how little we were working with. I had access to the autopsy photos. For a few hours, I looked through them trying to understand what I was seeing. The parts of her that should be inside the tree were missing. It appeared that the wood had naturally grown around her flesh instead of it being perfectly cut away for her. She was easily identified as a teenager who worked a midnight shift at a gas station. Another confusing fact is that her workplace was located 2 hours away from where she was found dead. And she was on camera leaving the building 1 hour before she was found. There was simply not enough time to transport her, let alone cut her apart and pose the body. Have you ever seen anything like this before? My boss asked as I was in the station looking over the photos. I really shouldn't be looking at them as often as I did. There wasn't much else to learn from just staring at the photos. My boss crossed himself when he looked down at the photos, even though it had been 10 years since he'd been inside a church. I shook my head. On my time off, I'd been looking up strange deaths online to find nothing like this. Nothing real. Just plenty of fake videos that got my hopes up. An even stranger part of this case was how this was the first time someone asked me anything about it. I was the one pressing others to answers and asking for the photos to study. The office felt so silent and somber. Everyone worked away in hushed tones. I understood that such a terrible thing was enough to unnerve all of us, but everyone working on the case acted as if they were ignoring it. Some leads were being followed up, but any time something related to solving what the hell happened to the girl, people became pale and quiet. My boss accepted my head shake as an answer. He gave the photos one last look and left me standing in the break room. No one wanted to talk about what happened. And I don't know if that was the reason why the second death happened. The second strange death call ended up being for a body inside a building. The deceased was an elementary school teacher. He was loved by everyone and not a soul had any reason to want him dead. He left behind 2 children and a loving wife. The problem was, he lived in the next state over. His wife refused to believe it was him until she came down to look at the body. He was asleep next to her, then in the morning, hundreds of miles away, stuck inside a parking garage ceiling with parts of him missing. The station worked double time following up on any lead. Every available man stayed late at the station or on the move, grasping at any kind of straw possible. Finally, some test results came back. When they landed on our boss's desk, none of us believed it. The lab tested parts of the tree to see if there was anything inside the wood like glue that may have helped keep the poor girl in place. The results came back as human DNA mixed perfectly with the tree. I noticed the wood looked a bit darker, but how the hell did the DNA get there? Did the blood seep in and stained it somehow? Because of the results, more pieces of the tree were cut out to be tested. They kept finding human DNA mixed into the wood. Far too deep for just blood getting slightly absorbed. The traces finally ended and we added how much of the tree had been contaminated. With some effort and math, the lab determined the DNA mixed with wood was equal to the same amount of missing from the girl. They then tested the cement of the car garage, finding the same results. Again, no one could even begin to offer up theories of how this was possible. It was as if somehow, those bodies became a part of the material they were found inside. We were just getting over that shock when the worst happened. Another body had been found. All twisted up like a pretzel inside and outside of the front of a car. My boss wasn't on the scene, but I knew he wouldn't be. The victim had been identified by him after all. It was his car and his niece. I've met Becky a few times. I didn't know if I would be able to document the scene if I knew the victim. But I found it like any other job simply because my mind refused to believe this was the same bright and lively girl that attended some Christmas parties. She played piano and my boss always bragged about her. He loved her like a daughter. He and his wife wouldn't have children, so they spoiled Becky as often as they could. And yet, he walked out of his house to get to work and saw her face half clipped into the front of his car. I don't know how he would ever be able to get over the grief. A neighboring department took over the case due to how many officers simply could not bring themselves to go to the scene. A floor of support came to the family, and still, not a single person spoke about the details. They all just shook their head with haunted looks on their faces, muttering how tragic a young life had been cut short. I felt determined before to solve this case, but now I wanted nothing more but to figure out the reason behind what was happening. I decided to take copies of the reports home. Every waking hour outside of my normal duties became dedicated to this case without any progress. On my days off, I found myself at home staring at the information I already knew, completely forgetting to eat. No matter if I looked at it from every angle, nothing made sense. There was no method anyone could use to arrange the bodies in the places they were found in. Even if there was, to do so in such a short amount of time was another thing making these cases impossible. I wasn't ever going to solve this on my own. I needed more eyes on these cases. No one would believe they were real though. I was staring up at the ceiling, thinking in circles when I heard my doorbell. I sat up, looking down the hallway, heart suddenly pounding. No one should be at my door. If I was needed for work, they would just call me. A feeling of dread overtook me when the doorbell rang again. Grabbing my phone in case I needed to call for help, I slowly made my way toward the door. The front door had a frosted window that didn't let me see who was waiting well enough to know if I was in danger or not. I opened the door only a crack to try and see who might be outside. "I'm not buying anything," I said, trying to be stern, but my voice was shaking. Two people stood on my doorstep. One man built like a club bouncer, wearing a suit that was far too small for him. Most of his face behind a set of sunglasses. Overall, he looked displeased with the world. The second man was tall but thin. His suit fitted him much better. "We're not selling anything. May we come in and talk?" the smaller man asked as he ducked down and brought his face closer to the opening. The action made me step back a little. He had a calm smile. And a soft voice that could put anyone at ease. That worried me. There was something too nice about his manner. As if he tried just a little bit too hard to be pleasant. "No, I don't think you can come inside." I closed the door right away, but he already had slipped in a foot to stop me from shutting it. He then got closer as if he wanted to tell me a secret. "It's really best for you if we came in to speak about these cases of yours," the stranger said in a low voice. Our eyes met and a chill went down my spine. They both had a menacing air about them under all that fake kindness. The fact that they knew about the cases and were wearing suits made me think they were of a higher pay grade than myself. FBI or something like that. I really hoped they were the feds taking over the case and just dropping by to make sure I stay silent. If I was stupid enough to talk to the wrong person about these cases, I could tip off the killer. And they didn't know if I was a talker or not. It was a valid theory about who they were, but it all felt wrong. Official agents would have already introduced themselves and shown me badges. They had done neither. Letting them inside was a very bad idea, but I felt as if I would get some answers from them regardless of the danger. Relaxing my grip, I opened the door and the first man came inside. The second needed to duck down to fit through the frame. I led them to the living room and the thinner one flopped down on the couch, placing one leg over his knee. He looked far too relaxed. The bigger one just stood behind the couch staring. I sat down in my comfy chair I recently found on the side of the road. I noticed the thinner one had cream color hair, the same shade as my couch. I'd never seen that shade on someone before. He seemed like the type of guy that companies sent to put forth a good first impression. Soft brown eyes could charm anyone, but I just didn't trust them. "I suppose we should make some introductions, Mr. Garcia. We know your name and occupation, but you don't know ours. I go by Jackalope, and my friend over there goes by Nessie. Unfortunately, we can't tell you who we work for or what we do." He started and gestured a thumb over at the silent man. Jackalope? Is that like a code name or something? I asked, eyebrow raised. Secret agents have code names. Do we look like secret agents to you? Jackalope asked, leaning in conspiratorially. It felt like he was teasing me. What else should I think? I replied, annoyed. He gave his hand a wave and leaned back. At first, I thought he was digging around his pockets for some cigarettes, but he pulled out a large round sucker. I waited for him to slowly unwrap it. Once it was in his mouth and his hands in his pocket, he carried on. Getting down to the reason why we're here. We work for a company that has an interest in these kinds of cases. We studied them before. They stopped very shortly after we heard about them, and so far, we have not been able to gather that much information. He explained, speaking around his candy. This has happened before? When? Where? How did it stop? I asked, my body starting to tremble over the thought of it all. These unnatural deaths happen somewhere else. And they could be stopped. I just needed to know the reason why they started in the first place. I can't outright tell you, but I can give you some hints. We have a working theory of why they stopped, so hint number 1. What is the strangest aspect of these cases? He pointed a finger at me while his partner remained silent, watching us. It was clear the strangest aspect was the mixture of the DNA and the body's placement. That didn't explain why they stopped. If someone or something could put them inside solid objects, they would keep going. No, what was even stranger than that was the lack of press on these cases. Not a single newspaper printed the story beyond the fact a body was found. These events should be all over the internet, and yet not even people working on the cases wanted to speak about them. Whenever my coworkers tried, they got a distant look on their faces and tried to avoid the subject. It was a terrible sight, almost beyond human understanding, and no one reported about it anywhere. No one wants to talk about it, I said finally. Bingo. Jackalope waved his finger, looking happy. I arrived at the answer. The more people talked about what was happening, the more it was going to happen. The thought nearly made me sick. I thought of Becky, all twisted inside that car. She was such a kind person and never should have died so soon. If these cases went on, more innocent people would become victims of this strange tragedy. Are you here to warn me to stop talking about all of this? I asked meekly. What? No. We want you to keep talking. Spread this far and wide. Post this online anywhere you like. It doesn't matter if people believe you, as long as they know about these cases, more is going to occur. The man sounded all too happy to explain the reason for his visit. It made rage boil up inside me. I shot to my feet, knees shaking. Do you want people to keep dying? I snapped at him. Giving me another kind smile, he waved both his hands to motion me to sit back down. Looking at the bigger silent partner, I decided that was best. I could toss Jackalope out, but not the other man. He waited until I felt calmer before speaking again. This is going to happen if you speak about it or not. The problem is, we can't figure out where or when. It happens so randomly. We are lucky to be able to arrive here so soon. We just need to study these events while they are going on to solve them. We want to stop them, but that requires sacrifices. I'm not going to sacrifice anyone. I replied without thinking. He looked at me as if he was dealing with a troublesome child. Running a hand through his tied back hair, he paused to try and think of the right words to explain what he wanted to say. I understood what he was getting at, but couldn't stand the thought of it. That is a respectable answer. I know you don't want to be the cause of someone dying. But this could save a lot of people in the future. If we could just study one or two of these events while it was happening, we could put an end to them once and for all. If you can't burden yourself with this task, we can find someone else. Although, it seems as if you are the only one working on this current set of cases willing enough to do it. Why can't you two say something then? Scared to get fired or something? There was more venom in my voice than needed. I was confused, scared, and angry. Most of my rage sputtered out when I watched both men look at each other. When Jackalope looked back at me, he had an expression I couldn't place. Something forlorn and almost distraught. Taking a hold of the stick of his sucker, he bit down and started to chew the remains of his candy, making me flinch. Do you know why we're called Nessie and Jackalope? Because those creatures don't exist. I felt a chill go through me as cold brown eyes stared me down. I knew now there was something much more going on than I originally thought. These men may be working for something way bigger than any government. And for a small moment, I didn't think either of them was human. When the air between us settled, Jackalope placed both hands on his knees to start to get up from the couch. Well, it's been nice chatting with you. You have a nice and comfy couch. Standing up, he looked at the other man and gave a silent sign for him to start walking toward the door. It's just an old ratty couch, I said, feeling as if I should correct him on something. Sometimes it's a special thing to become old. And to able to own older items. He replied with a smile. He was strange. I was scared of what he represented, but, in a way, I didn't dislike him. He did his job very well by winning people over with his nature. I walked him to the door, his partner already outside. You don't need to do this if you find it too difficult. No one would blame you, so don't worry about it. We'll find the answer at some point, Jackalope said, pausing at the door. He rustled in his suit pocket and took out another sucker, but instead of eating it, he held it out for me to take. He then suddenly leaned in very close, and I was positive he was going to unveil some secret knowledge of the case he didn't want his partner outside overhearing. Do you know where to buy the cream flavors of this brand of lollipops? I've been looking all over. He asked in a low voice. I brought my hand up to my mouth to turn a small laugh into a cough, hoping he didn't notice. Taking the candy offered, I found this man stupid but endearing in a strange way. I've seen them at the dollar store. I told him, and his face lit up. Giving me a small wave, he trotted out the front door, closing it behind him. I was left in the hallway staring with a sucker in my hand and a lot to think about. I could be the reason why someone died horribly. And the reason why loved ones would be suffering for the rest of their lives because of the death of another. But if I didn't do this, then it would just keep happening until someone accepted the hard task of spreading information about these deaths. I thought about it for a long time. And what was really best in the long run? There was a chance I post this and nothing happens. No new cases come up and it just all ends on its own. While out shopping and still deep in thought, I noticed a small display of the same brand of suckers Jackalope liked. Mixed in were the cream flavors he was after. Buying a few on a whim, I decided then and then I would be the one who said something about these cases. Even if only one more person finds out about them, it felt like I was actually doing something. I'll update again if any new information comes to light because of my actions. I work as a CSI. Part 2. The clipped body cases. A few months ago, I started working on some very strange cases as a CSI. Bodies were being found inside solid objects. Inside a tree, inside a building, and inside a car. It simply wasn't possible for them to be in those places in such a short amount of time. And the lab results came back suggesting that somehow, the bodies became fused into the material they were found inside. The strangest part of the case was people stopped talking about it. No newspaper reported them, and no one leaked them online. Then I was visited by two oddballs looking to be agents of some sort, claiming if I posted about the cases online, more bodies would appear and they might be able to solve what was happening. In the end, I agreed. And became the next victim. One night I went to bed early for once. When I woke up, I felt an all-encompassing pain, wondering what the hell was happening. I found myself on my back, hard cement under my body. Because of the red-hot pain in my stomach, I didn't even notice where I ended at first. I only saw the stone pillar sticking out through my gut. I stared at it in disbelief before letting out some hoarse screams. It hurt so much I could barely make any noise. I put my hands against the stone, feeling its coldness. I prayed this wasn't happening, and I just became aware in the middle of a terrible nightmare. This situation was identical to the cases I had been called on. People with objects clipped inside their bodies, for a lack of a better way to describe it. When I agreed to keep the cases going by posting about them online, I never would have thought I would not only be next, but the people we found were still alive when they became fused into something. The horror of that thought came over me. How long did Beck live for being all twisted up inside that car? By all rights, I should have died right away. The stone pillar took up most of my stomach and important organs would have been damaged or gone. Silently sobbing, I tried to see if there was any way I could remove myself from my position. The pillar stood in a line of others with chains attaching them together. They were made to be a barrier to keep people from going off the park pathway and near the lake just a few feet away. If I pushed myself up, I would get trapped on the chain. I decided I would try and move, hoping that would damage the remaining of my stomach and kill me faster. But my brain hesitated for a few long and painful seconds. I heard a car pull up in the distance, the sound stopping my attempt to move. I knew was already dead, but in the back of my mind I wondered if I got medical attention fast enough, I may live. It was an unreasonable thought. I was missing most of my torso from the pillar. People could live without certain things, but not nearly all of their stomach. There wasn't a doctor in the world that could save me. Still, I moved my head towards the sound of someone walking, trying to fight back pain and panic. I saw their shoes first. Clean and shiny professional dress shoes. Not entirely shiny. One had a small scuff from where I slammed my door onto it a while ago. Looking up, I saw the surprised face of a man named Jackalope. He wore a suit and gear bundled up on his back. "I wasn't expecting to see you, Mr. Garcia." He sounded honestly shocked. Without addressing me again, or attempting to help in any way, he started to set up high spotlights. Placing down a white tarp within a few minutes, my dark corner of the world turned into a blazing white. He also set up a camera on a tripod but didn't turn it on just yet. The lights looked heavy although he didn't have any issues setting them up. I whimpered from pain, ready to die as he worked away. I really shouldn't be giving you this so early, but. Taking a case out from somewhere, he placed it down beside me. Due to how much pain felt from the pillar, I did not feel the prick of a needle going into my arm. Within a minute the pain faded. My entire body turned warm and loose. I nearly fell asleep, but he gave me another shot that made me keep my eyes open. I still felt drowsy but thankful for the pause in the pain. My head felt heavy and I turned it towards him. His cream-colored hair fell out of the ponytail as he worked. After fixing his hair, he sat down a few feet from me, hands on his knees studying my situation. "Thank you," I muttered, sounding sleepy. "It's good stuff. Not available to the public for pretty good reasons. Anyway, if you're feeling up to it, I need to ask you a few questions. If we can figure out a link between the victims, we may be able to put an end to this whole mess." He stood up to turn on the camera but paused when I spoke again. "Am I going to die?" I asked, finding my strength. "Yes," he replied after a few seconds. It was a miracle I wasn't dead already. Everything about these cases went beyond logic. Nothing natural could explain how this was happening. Or how I wasn't already dead. I wondered how often Jackalope came across cases as strange as this. He let me suffer while he worked setting up his gear. He carried on with his strange job with no hesitations. He didn't even look like he cared that I was going to die soon, aside from a slight pause in telling me my fate. This man sounded and acted friendly, but he might be entirely something else under that mask. "Aren't those socks against your company dress code?" I asked finally with a weak laugh. Peeking out from his suit pants were a pair of neon green socks. He gave me a smile, almost looking relieved I'd forgiven him for how he so coldly acted beforehand. I heard him turn on the camera and watched as he sat back down to get on my level. Taking a clipboard, he put it against his legs to look over the questions on the sheet. I still felt sleepy and ready to pass out. It took a lot of willpower to stay awake. I reached over to touch the cold stone pillar to remind myself of my fate. I wasn't going to just slip off into a nap. Death waited for me. "Now, Mr. Garcia. You can call me Carlos," I interrupted. "Carlos then," he said with a small smile and went back to his clipboard. "It says here your mother passed away. Let's see, what was your relationship with her and how did her death change you?" I might not understand how or why people were being clipped inside things, but what does my mother have to do with any of this? Becky, one of the other victims, still had both of her parents alive when she passed away. Hell, she never lost a single person in her life before. This line of questioning didn't feel relevant. I loved her and I became motivated to make something of myself after she died. "What about your mother? Are you close to her?" I mostly tossed his question back at him to waste his time because I felt like he wanted to waste the limited amount I had left. "I don't have anything like that. Let's see." He said it in such a matter-of-fact tone it hurt my chest. I long suspected that Jackalope was an agent of some shadow organization. He may have been an orphan raised to do just one job and didn't have any connections in the world. The man simply a living ghost. Having that theory outright proven in so few words felt unexpected. "I bought you some of those cream suckers you liked. They're at my place. My spare key is hidden under my little happy frog figure on the front lawn if you want to go and get them after I die." I commented only because the thought crossed my mind. The comment a silly thing to bring up. I brought them and it would be a waste for them to not make it to their intended person. Jackalope looked a bit surprised again. It appeared as if no one had ever gotten him anything before. Maybe that was the truth. He placed his clipboard beside himself and then brought his long legs against his chest. His arms wrapped under his deeps as he looked deep in thought. "Do you have any lingering regrets?" he asked me, displaying some somber emotions that didn't suit him at all. What a thing to ask someone while they had a post stuck inside their stomach. Of course, I had regrets. I regretted dying to start with. I felt hot tears come to my eyes as my end loomed ever closer. A million thoughts came flooding to my mind because of the question. I felt so scared of death, and strangely at the same time, I felt guilty about those thoughts. I don't want to die so soon, but why is that? I don't have anyone. My father was shot in the line of duty and my mother died of cancer. I've dated on and off but never found a person who I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. I don't even have a pet. Not even a fish. Why should I want to live? I guess I regret that. Living a life I didn't think was worth living and yet wanting to keep going. It's not fair, you know? That I want to stay alive when I have nothing and no one. Becky still has so many people mourning her. She was going to be something. I needed to stop speaking to choke down sobs. Jackalope listened patiently and started to pick at a wrapper of one of his suckers. He looked unmoved. The only hint he felt a little upset over my rant was how he just couldn't find the start of the wrapper to open it. The pain in my stomach drew my eyes away from him. Whatever he gave me started to wear off and I assumed I ran out of time. I wasted my entire life and yet at the end of it wanted it to keep going. Just a bit longer for me to do something, anything to make it all worth it. I'm sorry. I raised a weak arm up to rub my eyes. For what? This is a perfectly reasonable reaction. Jackalope replied but still hadn't gotten the wrapper started. I've made you cry. Unaware of it himself, tears started in the corner of his eyes. Pausing trying to get his candy free, he raised a hand up to rub one eye and stared puzzled at the wetness on his finger. More tears started to come and he used the sleeves of his suit to make attempts to dry them. It was a strange sight to see someone crying when they weren't aware of why it happened. That's strange. This shouldn't be possible for me. I knew the thought to be selfish, but I felt glad that he was there in the end. I finally did something in my life. Even if that small something just left my mark on a stranger who might not even be fully human. Waves of pain started overtaking my thoughts and I closed my eyes trying to shut it all out. It was becoming nearly impossible to breathe and my entire body felt like fire. I might only have a few moments left. I could only hope my death lead to some answers as to why people died being clipped inside things and so this wouldn't happen to someone else. I heard Jackalope's frantic voice calling out my name to try and keep me awake. I never expected him to care so much. The pain kept my eyes closed but I heard him rushing around running back and forth on the white tarp. Whatever he started doing, I felt like I needed to see it. It felt like hours dragged on but only minutes passed. Opening my eyes a crack, I saw the man I would like to consider a friend kneeling in front of a small black stone slab. His head bowed and nearly touched the tarp. The black slab only a few inches tall and wide. Still, it gave off such an ominous look sitting on top of the white tarp and inside the bright spotlights. Whatever power the slab held, it scared me more than my quickly approaching death. I opened my mouth to ask Jackalope to stop. The words died inside my throat. Jackalope lifted his head only enough to meet my eyes. I swear he gave me a little wink. Then, a gust of wind slammed into me. I couldn't hear anything through the noise of the tarp flapping around and nearly being blown away. The spotlight slammed to the ground, sparks flying. Darkness overtook my sight. Just before my vision faded, I saw that darkness covered Jackalope on the ground. Dark tendrils twisted around him taking him into the blackness and there wasn't a damn thing I could do about it. I woke up screaming and tumbled out of my bed. For a long while, I could do nothing but scream and hugged my knees against my chest. When the fear finally started to fade, I sat in shock over being alive in my own room. Frantically I lifted my shirt seeing a large scar where the pillar had been. A scar I did not have before that night. My legs were unsteady so I sat on my floor confused and terrified over what happened that night. If it wasn't for the scar, I would have assumed the entire thing was a nightmare from being stressed from working such odd cases. I should have died that night. Jackalope did something to save me and I had no way of figuring out his fate. The next few weeks we made no progress on the odd clipping cases. They started to slowly go closer to the cold case pile. In the meantime, I started to do little things in my life so I wouldn't have the same regrets as I did before. First, I donated some blood and then put myself down for an organ donor. If I died the next day, I might be able to save someone. That was a slight improvement over the useless life I'd lived so far. I then adopted a rabbit. I really wasn't home enough for one but I still got him. The people at the animal shelter worked with me to make sure I had everything set up for him, and even put him on hold until I got everything together. I wasn't even aware the animal shelters kept rabbits. Here I thought they just took in dogs and cats. Soon I owned a 1-year-old white rabbit named Pesto. After all my minor improvements I still felt guilty. As if I didn't deserve my second chance. Trying to shake off those thoughts I went to the pet store to buy more supplies and toys for Pesto. I pulled my car into the driveway and my heart nearly stopped when I saw someone sitting on my front porch. Gathering my shopping bags, I walked over and stopped just before the stone steps thinking I might be seeing things. Jackalope sat wearing a large wool coat and a small travel bag sat next to him. The left side of his lips was torn and scarred over so badly that his teeth showed through. His left eye was a dull blue and he wore glasses. More guilt tore through my stomach but he only gave me a smile. I got fired. He told me with that warm smile of his still on his face. I got so choked up I couldn't respond. I walked up the few steps to my front door. Can you take these so I can unlock the door? I asked him, holding out the shopping bags. He knew where I kept my spare key. I didn't know why he waited outside until I got back. He reached out to take the bags, but something felt off. Focusing on his movements, I nearly dropped my key when I realized what wasn't right. The left coat sleeve flapped around empty. Not only did he become half blind for my sake, he also lost an arm. Terrible guilt twisted inside my stomach. No matter how I lived my life from now on, I would never be able to repay such a sacrifice. Why would you give up your arm for someone like me? It wasn't worth it. I couldn't meet his eyes as my stomach tightened. You were kind enough to think about me after we met. It seems like you're still thinking about me. He added with a small laugh and raised up the pet supply bag to prove a point. I could have adopted a cat, but I'd adopted a rabbit because I felt guilty. That's not enough of a reason to go so far. I argued. People have lost a lot more for a lot less. Pulling out a sucker from his pocket, he started to try and open the wrapper with one hand. I reached out and took it for him to open, only for him to offer it back to me. I couldn't bring myself to refuse the offer. He lived the life of a person who had nothing and no one in his life. Not a soul thought of him after they met. He had one job, with an organization I didn't know a thing about. Given a name that reflected his non-existence in the world. I had the sudden realization that my life wasn't worthless until that point. If one small gesture like buying candy for a stranger affected another so greatly, I may have done other extraordinary acts without being aware of them. They kicked me out of the recovery station and I'm in a bit of a pickle. I didn't want to bother you, but I don't know anyone else. May I crash on your couch for a few days until I can get myself a bit more in order? He saved my life. I wasn't certain how, but that didn't change how much I owed him. I would have forced him to stay if he didn't ask. Nodding, I finished unlocking the front door so we could go inside. We still haven't solved the cases of the clipped bodies. I didn't ask him questions about his job or what is really going on. Right now, I just wanted Jackalope to get settled. He didn't say so, but he looked tired. I introduced him to Pesto and sat down to type all this out. When I came back to check on him, he'd fallen asleep on the couch with Pesto on his chest. I may not know anything about him, but I trust him. After he recovers, we'll work towards solving the strange body cases without the help of his mystery organization. They tossed him away after he broke whatever rules and saved me. I needed to prove to myself that what he sacrificed was worth it. I work as a CSI. Part 3. A strange job offer. No matter how much I wanted to interrogate Jackalope about his previous job, I refused to put any kind of pressure on him for the first week he stayed at my place. He needed to get settled in and hadn't fully adjusted to missing an arm. He made attempts to help out around the house, but was pretty slow doing chores. My new roommate quickly got a new job. I told him he should take a break and let himself fully heal, but he refused to not contribute towards the bills. The new job had great benefits. His eyesight was fixed to the point where he just had bad night vision. His left eye was still a dull blue instead of a soft brown though. I had no idea people who delivered mail got such great medical care. Over breakfast, Jackalope finally decided he wanted to tell me what he was able about the still unsolved clipped cases, and a little bit about his job now. I left the dishes to be washed later and met him in the living room. He honestly got along pretty well with Pesto. He and that rabbit might as well be made for each other. I guess I need to start by telling you supernatural things are real, Jackalope said as he let Pesto chew on his shirt sleeve for a few seconds. What does that mean? Like, are vampires real? I asked, starting to process what he said. Then I leaned over to whisper. Are you a vampire? Mostly as a joke. Jackalope took my terrible sense of humor well. Pesto decided he didn't and hopped away to create some sort of mess we needed to clean up later. I'm something not human. Let's leave it at that for now. And let's just leave it vague on what kind of supernatural things are out there, or else we would be here all day. I don't even know every creature that are real or not. He explained and moved to sit on the couch. I would need to force more information out of him later. For now, I accepted what he was saying. I sat in my chair and kept an eye on our troublesome rabbit. Those deaths that happened. They weren't natural. How much about them have you not told me? I pressed, hoping he would drop something that may finally solve those cases. When I was an agent, I mostly worked on cases relating to cults or gods, he said as if that statement was normal. Gods? Like what? The god? Is there more than one? I pressed. I cannot confirm or deny the Christian God, or any other kind for that matter. We call creatures with power beyond understanding gods. They can be kind, or not so kind. Most of the time they're just that. Beyond any kind of understanding. We suspected the clipping cases were caused by a certain dark god. After I prayed to him and offered anything of mine for your life, We confirmed it was the god behind the deaths, Jackalope said with a strained smile. His missing arm and scarred face were a touchy topic for both of us. I tried not to bring it up at all if I could help it. He didn't dwell on that detail, so I didn't remark on what kind of life debt I owed him. Does this dark god have a name? I asked, wondering if this creature was on the same level as Lovecraftian gods. He decided to go by Dan, Jackalope said with a shrug. It was like time stopped because of how unimpressed I felt. Dan? A dark god beyond human understanding and killed at least 4 people I knew about in a gruesome way picked the name Dan? Jackalope saw my expression and shook his head. I told you it wasn't possible to understand them. This god. Dan. I cut in. Dan, Jackalope sighed and went on. Has agreed to stop the clipping cases if someone can guess the reason behind them. He is letting every person take one guess. We were collecting information to see if there had been any similarities or anything we could work with on those cases. No luck so far. Jackalope made a move to cross his arms before he realized he was missing one. He just leaned back on the couch instead. He looked upset over these murders would keep happening. Could I take a guess? I offered. With a nod, he sat up again. I don't see why not. Even if it's wrong, we could eliminate a possibility, he agreed. At least that was something. A wrong guess still helped. I asked if I needed to get in contact with his old work to do this. He shook his head and got up to head to the spare bedroom I'd let him take over. Jackalope didn't own too many things. I've gone out and bought him some clothing the past week because he only had 3 sets of shirts and pants beside his suits. He came back shortly with an object in his hand that gave me chills. He set it on the coffee table and then wrangled Pesto to put him in the other room. I didn't want our pet rabbit to be near this thing either. I stared at the small black tablet made of some sort of polished stone. The same cursed object that Jackalope prayed to save my life. Had this thing been inside the house the entire time? I didn't like that fact, but I didn't feel the same kind of power coming off the small stone as before. It looked creepy as hell, but it didn't strike dread in my heart. It's like a phone call. Unless he picks up, the stone is powerless, Jackalope said. I got up to stand next to the small slab, but Jackalope brought it closer to himself. You don't have to talk to him if you don't want to. He nearly killed you. My friend pointed out. The new scar on my stomach hurt a bit at his words. I haven't forgotten that night. It's a miracle I've been able to get any sleep after that brush with death. But I knew no matter how much I disliked the idea of getting in contact with the monster that almost killed me, I needed to do so to try and save others. I gave him a nod showing I felt ready enough to try out this crazy idea. Jackalope didn't like it but respected my resolve. I didn't know where to start. Did I need to chant? Bow to the slab? Make offerings? Jackalope sat on the floor and gestured for me to sit next to him. We both faced the small stone slab and waited. Turns out the dark god was just waiting for someone to try and reach out to him. The room became dark around us. The light faded from the corners first and slowly crept closer. I wanted to move my head to look but felt far too scared to do so. Something touched my hand and I nearly jumped out of my skin. I risked a glance down and saw Jackalope's hand next to mine. I didn't care what other people might think of the action. I took his hand and held it tight. We were about to talk to a creature powerful to kill us without any effort. I needed as much support as I could get. A sudden pressure came to our backs. I knew without looking something was watching us. Something huge. All at once I understood how bad of an idea this was. It felt different than what I saw when this thing took Jackalope. The god watching us could take my life on a whim. I knew then that the pillar was the kindest death this monster could think of. The gaze pressed down on us almost to the point the pressure made me move. I didn't hear the words but saw the question in my head. Why did I kill them in that way? The words inside my head hurt like hell. I almost wasn't able to form any thoughts. It took everything not to buckle under the weight. My heart started to beat so fast it felt as if it may stop. The god at our back pushed down harder. I doubted it really wanted the question answered. My life was at risk. I realized that far too late. If I wavered for a second, that darkness would happily overtake me. A set of invisible hands wrapped around my neck. I choked on air. The fear that overtook my mind made me forget everything else. I was going to die. Simple as that. There wasn't a damn thing I could do about it. I was facing a god. A powerful one that killed humans in such cruel and twisted ways. Just before I fell into the hands of that monster, a feeling brought me back to my senses. Jackalope squeezed my hand so tightly it hurt. The gesture chased away the hands on my neck. If he faced this god all on his own, then I could as well. I finally found my voice and spoke the answer out loud. Because you could. I barely choked out. The silence that followed nearly killed me. Not a single sound could be heard in the room. Just as I thought I may pass out, a laugh tore through the darkness that started to creep ever closer. I finally gulped air, coughing on it. The laughter shook the house and rattled my bones. I curled over and brought a hand up to my ear in a poor attempt at blocking out the sound. When it finally stopped, I couldn't stop shaking. It took me a few minutes to recover. I looked up and saw the stone tablet cracked clean in half and Jackalope giving me a bewildered expression. Before I could say anything to him, the phone started to ring. I faintly heard his cell phone ringing as well. I might be one of the last batch of people to have a landline. But no one ever called it. Jackalope got up and hurried over to answer the phone. My legs refused to move, so I just sat listening to his responses. Yes, no, not myself. It was him, he said to the person on the other end while nodding. I could see him from where I sat. After a long pause, he nodded again. I'll ask him, he said, and then brought the phone against his chest so the person on the other line wouldn't hear him speak. Do you want a job? My head swam with a million questions. I answered him gracefully. Huh? I don't think anyone could blame me for that response. It took a few hours for me to grasp what was happening and what exactly just got offered to me. The company that fired Jackalope wanted to hire me on for some cases. It seems like I did guess the right reason as to why that terrible monster killed innocent people. That gained me some sort of recognition, but they also noticed my profession. A secret company that dealt with taking care of supernatural creatures needed a CSI. For some reason. On principle, I wanted to reject their offer. But I saw the pay increase and debated on it long enough for Jackalope to notice. He still wasn't able to fully tell me what this company was like, but he wanted me to make an informed decision. To be honest, I don't like the idea of you doing this job. But working as a CSI may be the safest position you can work when it comes to the corporation. They pay insanely well. And you can quit at any time. I would say to do the interview and sleep on it. At the very least, I decided to go in for the interview. I might learn some information that Jackalope wasn't able to give. The sudden job offer took my mind off the fact we both faced a god that day. That caught up to me and I found my legs shaking. I needed to sit down, my head swimming for everything that happened in such a short amount of time. Thankfully, my new roommate collected the 2 pieces of the slab and took it outside. We would never have a need for such a cursed object. I think he threw it over the fence into the neighbor's yard, but I wasn't certain. He soon came back into the living room to collapse on the couch next to me. I could have died, I said out loud, the shock wearing off. If I knew that was a possibility, I never would have let you place that call. I may have drawn that God's attention onto you because I asked for your life. But we now don't need to ever deal with him again. I chewed on my lip, thinking of the most important question, unsure if I wanted the answer. After finally knowing why those people died, I didn't feel any sense of closure. What happens to the cases? Are they going to be unsolved forever? Is that God going to be punished for what he did? I asked mostly to myself. Jackalope thought about his answers. He knew anything he said would be unfair. It was hard for him to admit what he was about to say. The corporation may stage some sort of end for those cases in order for the families to fully bury their loved ones. For cases like this that have a supernatural cause, they always do a cover-up. And no, I don't think the killer is going to be punished in any way. He's too powerful for almost all of the agents currently working. The few that can do something about what he's done are far too valuable to risk avenging a few human deaths. I didn't have a high opinion of his old job before, but now I really disliked it. He noticed my expression and finally smiled. After getting scared to death, the expression was a welcome one. The corporation makes hard decisions, but its main goal is to protect humans from the supernatural. I know it's hard hearing they would let a god go free for killing humans, but they're doing so agents can live and keep saving as many people as possible. The corporation has done a great deal I don't agree with. But I understand it. I nodded, knowing what he was getting at. I was on the fence if I wanted to work for a company that operated like that. I wanted to help save lives as much as I was able, but could I stomach the costs? Speaking of disagreeing with hard calls. If you do accept the job, I would prefer it if you did not work in the department Lupa oversees, Jackalope said, interrupting my thoughts. Lupa? I asked, trying to think if I recognized the word from somewhere. He's one of the office supervisors. They decided what agents go to what cases. He's good at his job, but we just don't get along. Working for anyone would be better for you. I wanted to press him on what he meant, but could tell he wasn't going to say anything more. Jackalope only held back information for my benefit. If I knew what really went bump in the night, I might not be able to sleep again. And if he talked more about his previous boss, I wouldn't be able to objectively consider taking the job. I'll keep it in mind. Did they say when this interview is? I asked, wondering what exactly was said over the phone. He shook his head and told me a text would be sent within the next few hours with more details. I accepted that answer and decided I needed to get some rest. My stomach refused to stop hurting from stress after our encounter. Jackalope also looked exhausted. I didn't bother him with any more questions for the rest of the day and just let him play with Pesto and take naps. I think he needed an easy day. Because Lupo was a very busy man, our interview was arranged very late. He requested I meet him at 10 p.m. A worker from the corporation knocked on my door to collect me for the meeting. I opened my front door and was taken aback after seeing the inside of an office building that should not be on the other side. We can connect 2 doorways together. I'll show you the way to Lupa's office. The agent told me in a forced cheerful tone. He wore a suit and nailed the government agent look. I carefully stepped inside the office and didn't want to close the door behind me. The agent reached out and shut the door behind us. I found myself trapped and unable to back out of this meeting. He guided us through the office space and down a few hallways until we reached a large door at the end. Large potted plants sat on each side of the door. Lupa written in golden letters made it clear who this office belonged to. Good luck, the agent said and quickly left for some other job task. I wasn't sure if I should go in or knock. I knocked first, and when I heard no answer, I stepped inside. A wave of hot and humid air hit my face right away. It was hard to know just how large the office space was. Each inch of it had been covered by plants. Some almost appeared alien, and others were just simple flowers. I made my way along the path and found a set of couches in the middle of the forest. Lupa sat with some reports in his hands waiting for my arrival. The only other information Jackalope gave me about this man did not at all help me prepare to see his appearance. My friend said that despite Lupa's height, he could be fairly menacing. I wondered if he had been joking. And why Jackalope couldn't get along with his boss. After all, he did love rabbits. He should enjoy being around the man I stared at. Lupa looked young, maybe mid-20s. He wore sharp dress pants and a vest combo. The vest brown with gold accents. His hair was short and a soft brown in a style a bit too fluffy to take seriously. If he stood up, he may only come up to my waist. His pants stopped at his knees and a pair of animal legs crossed over each other. If I didn't see his ears, I still would have known right away what kind of animal those legs belonged to. His ears stood tall on his head. So tall it added half a foot to his height. I desperately wanted to touch his rabbit ears. He might look harmless, but I bet Lupa could break my face with a flick of a finger. He brought his golden eyes up to meet mine and I quickly sat down on the couch across from him. Gods, secret agents, and rabbit people. My life had gotten strange. Should I have brought a resume along? I asked as Lupa set down the papers in his hand. We already know of your work experience. This meeting is mostly to answer any pressing questions you may have. I assume there are a few. He answered in a voice that sounded far too adult for his small body. I have enough questions to fill a book. I started with the simple ones. Why ask me to work here? Don't you have a ton of other people who can do my job? Like I bet most with any career related to law enforcement must know about monsters already and could be a better choice, I said, doubting they only offered the job because I answered a question correctly. Lupa shook his head, being very patient. We are very careful to ensure humans are not aware that creatures of the night are real. Since law enforcement is more likely to encounter them, we focus our efforts on taking over such cases. Or averting their attention when needed. But on occasion, some cases are difficult to appear natural. He explained. Other than erasing our memories and covering up the death, there wasn't much they could do to make those cases normal. Even a cover-up might make the entire situation more suspicious. Was it possible for this company to erase memories? Just how much power did they hold? So, you want to hire me because I found out about the supernatural? But why would your company even need a CSI? Like, how would that even work? Do you arrest monsters? I pressed. Lupa paused, trying to get his thoughts in order. There was a lot to tell me and not that much time. At times we are not certain if the culprit is human or a supernatural case. Sometimes bodies are found, and the police assume an animal did the damage. In reality, it was a creature hunting in the wrong area. Your job is to cover those scenes in the same way you would for a natural case. If it turns out to be a creature behind the crimes, we catch and kill them. If it is a human, we send off the collected evidence to the police to close the case. Lupa explained in an even tone. His calm voice sent a chill down my spine. I wasn't fully aware of what kind of creatures were out there, but weren't some like Jackalope? I couldn't help but think that maybe some kind of creature killed a human in self-defense. If that happened, would they be put to death for the crime? And if that kind of situation didn't happen, then were there just monsters out there hunting us without anyone knowing? There isn't a prison or anything like that? I slowly asked. There are places to hold creatures who are waiting to be put down. Or the ones we aren't entirely certain of their crimes. On rare occasions, we offer the creature a job hunting down the ones who share the same crime. We lack resources. They are going to die either way, might as well be useful. Another chill went through my body. Lupa smiled, but on him, it looked more like a grimace. I now knew why Jackalope didn't get along with him. This man was the type to only care about the bigger picture. He tossed my friend aside because he lacked power. No, I bet he got angry Jackalope sacrificed his ability to work for a single human. His future of saving others was cut short in exchange for my life. Lupo was good at his job. His main goal is to protect humans from supernatural threats. And he didn't care about how many agents needed to be used up to do so. As much as I hated the idea of what this man stood for, I still wanted the job. If I worked for them, then maybe I could help save others. I bet they had agents doing the crime scene documentation right now. If I freed up just one of them, then they could go and save others I couldn't. I can take the job, but would it be possible to work in a different department other than yours? I asked and braced for the reply. Another forced smile came to Lupa's face. Instead of small teeth, he showed off sharp fangs for half a second. I see Jackalope spoke about me, he said in a slightly darker tone than before. He was fair. I realized we might not get along after speaking with you. The air grew tense at my words. Sweat started on the back of my neck and it wasn't due to the humidity in the room. Finally, Lupa relaxed with a shrug. You'll be offered cases as they come up. I'll be the one overseeing the first few because I'm the one who offered to hire you. After a report or two on your progress, you'll be free to bounce around whatever department you wish. There is no lack of cases needing to be covered. Dealing with him was almost as bad as dealing with a dark god. With that settled, I wanted to get the hell out of this room. A phone rang from somewhere inside the office giving me a reason to leave. I stood up and brushed against a large leaf of a plant I didn't know. Be careful on the way out. Most of these plants are poisonous, Lupa said and dismissed himself to disappear into the greenery. He might have been joking, but I didn't take any changes. The same agent that guided me along took me back to a door that led home. The idea of them being able to open a door that led to the inside of my house really wasn't appealing. Peace of mind was worth more than convenience. The first thing I did was head to the bathroom to wash my arm where the leaf touched. My skin red, but that may be from the scrubbing. Jackalope was already in bed by the time I got back home. His new job wore him out. He often took naps while hanging out with Pesto or just trying to do chores. I kept the bathroom light on as I walked into the hallway looking for a towel. I'd washed most of them and never put them back in the bathroom. The small closet should have a cloth or something. When I opened it, I found it empty of all the extra sheets and blankets. I found that strange. A cloth was on the floor by Jackalope's bedroom. He left his door open a crack while he slept. I bent down to pick up the cloth and peeked inside his room. With the light from the bathroom, I saw a mountain of blankets on his bed explaining where they went. He must be dying under all of those. I made a mental note to tell him in the morning he could turn up the heat if he got cold at night. But it wasn't chilly at all, which I found strange. I reached out to turn off the bathroom light and my hand froze. The idea of being in the dark scared me down to my very core. The feeling of what it was like facing that God came back. It took all my willpower to push those feelings back and not run around the house turning on all the lights. That small moment explained why my new roommate took all the blankets he was able. He'd gone into the darkness alone and lost pieces of himself. The cold blackness would always follow him. He wasn't able to keep the lights on at night without me asking questions, so he kept the coldness away. He also refused to ever speak about this. I knew he didn't want me to regret the fact he saved my life. I didn't know how to approach the topic. But I couldn't let him suffer at night like this. The next day I worked a regular job. It felt odd seeing a hoarder's death as just a normal day after everything I'd seen. I went shopping on the way home. I caught Jackalope before he went to bed. I showed him the two items I picked up that day. A heated blanket and block of glass with a rabbit on the inside. If you put the glass over a small light base, it makes the image appear 3D. He understood why I gave them these random gifts, but neither of us spoke about it. He just thanked me and went to sleep, this time with the light inside his room and warm without feeling weight pressing down on him. I knew if I accepted the job at the corporation, I would be exposed to more dangerous and terrifying things. Jackalope said it was a pretty safe job, And yet my life would be in danger depending on the cases. Still, I wanted to do my best to put an end to any case even remotely similar to the clipped body deaths. I said I wanted to make a difference in my life. And this was one way on how to do it.